President Isaias Afewerki has an interesting take when it comes to China and Africa relation. He said that the Western world is trying to defame China and they're trying to create a rift between Africa and China. Let me show you what he said. We'll come back and discuss.
You can't go back and blame China for any mishap. If you are planning an economy, if you have resources to mobilize, if you have goals to achieve in any area or in any sector, definitely you have to have the correct policies and you have to have the institutional mechanism to implement this. China would be willing to support and help, allow governments to borrow money, but ultimately the management issue falls on the responsibility of the African side. Blaming China for debt traps is simply defaming the achievements and probably trying to create some rift between African and Chinese contributions in the solidarity that has achieved the economic development we see today. One of the worrying things for these hegemonistic forces globally is China working with Africa to extricate Africa from the marginalization that it exists today and move forward in solidarity with the peoples of Africa. If there are mistakes done by African government, debt traps will have to be managed by learning from mistakes and correcting the handling of the economies that have failed into this trap.
Yep, that is what he said. And by the way, a lot of people share his sentiment and they feel like China at the moment is being bashed by the US or by the EU in order to turn off Africans from having a relationship with China or building any kind of development agreement or to have trade. Because I remember there was a time where we're just hearing about China did this, China is doing that, China is taking away so-and-so's port, China is trying to enslave Africans by just drowning them with debts. And we've heard quite a lot about this topic. But some argue that there's no evidence to show that. Yes, they've invested a lot. Yes, they've built roads, there's infrastructure, and there's so much that they have done for Africa. Of course, it's a give and take, but in return, at the very least, they're not asking African countries to change their values, to accept their culture, to act like the Chinese, be like the Chinese. You know how certain countries decide to dictate you once they give you money. So that's not what people have seen with the Chinese. So they defend China and also Russia, but right now it's about China, and he talked about China. I remember a few months ago during the Russia-Africa summit, he also defended Russia as well. But right now, when he's talking about China and the defaming of China, as I said, a lot of people share his sentiment, but he said something quite interesting that I really want to focus on. He said the responsibility of management falls on African side. He's talking about after taking a loan from China or after they make an agreement of you will build this road and in return we're going to do this and that. When they're drafting that contract and Africans get the side that China has promised, let's say it's a loan and they give out to an African country, they need to return it, right? It's a loan. But if the African country, the leader, decides to take that money and use it for whatever they want to use it, and then 10 years later, China comes and they're like, okay, you borrowed, you said you're going to return it, where's my money? If we don't have the money, then he is saying that it's on Africa's side. The problem is mismanagement of the money that we're borrowing. And to be honest, we've seen mismanagement across the board, and it's even horrifying how much mismanagement. Like, you can tolerate 10, 20, even 30% of mismanagement, which is still bad. But when you see close to 80-90% of mismanagement, they have nothing to show for the money that they have taken, is just mind-boggling and sad, because the next generation has to worry about paying that money with interest. So I thought it was interesting that he mentioned that. But as I said, a lot of people share his sentiment. Not everyone though. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that he is telling the truth when it comes to Africa-China relationship? I am Wongel Zelalem. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.